Later, Fate starts to wonder if Mine really has the gluttony skill because she keeps eating all the time. As she eats more, she says that getting angry uses a lot of energy. Fate wonders where all the food goes. Mine gets really mad at Fate for asking and ends up making her weapons so heavy that it breaks their carriage. Fate is shocked because fixing it will cost a lot, but Mine doesn't seem to care. They reach a small, peaceful town, but Greed warns them they're getting close to Gallia, a place where monsters are dangerous. It's clear that someone strong is protecting this village since they see a castle in the distance. When they meet the village chief, they see he's holding a holy sword, so he's probably a holy knight, keeps the village safe. Before letting them stay, the chief wants to fight Fate first. The chief is different. He instantly knows Fate is using his Identify skill on him, and even knows Fate is only level 1, but has stats over 2 million. Fate asks when the chief used Identify on him. The chief just wants to fight. Fate agrees, and the fight is over quickly, the chief winning. Fate thinks they can't stay in the village now. The chief feels Fate has a reason to be there. Fate's surprise, the chief lets them stay, but wants Fate to train with him. The chief says there's something special about Fate. Fate thinks something might be strange. Chief points out that Fate doesn't know how to deal with the Identify skill, and isn't using his other skills fully. He thinks Fate's body hasn't adjusted to his new power yet. While Fate's current skills might work on monsters, they won't work as well against strong human. Greed is suspicious because the chief isn't asking for anything in return, but Fate sees this as a chance to learn from a holy knight. He agrees, and the chief introduces himself as Aaron. Mine arrives, and Aaron immediately recognizes her as a skilled warrior. Training starts with hand-to-hand combat because Aaron believes it's the best way to control one's stats. He knows Fate struggles with this, as it's common for warriors who suddenly get a lot of strength. Aaron gives Fate tips, correcting his stance, and tells him that tensing up makes him weaker, slower. He teaches Fate that staying relaxed helps him generate more power and tap into his hidden strength. Everything seems fine, but suddenly Fate feels sharp pain as his gluttony skill activates. Aaron sees that Fate's eye color has changed, and Fate starts moving much more smoothly. They continue their sparring match, and Greed notices that Fate is doing well, even though he's almost starving. When their training ends, Fate senses a monster nearby and wonders if it's in the castle. Just then, Aaron shouts, but it turns out Mine is just eating alone again. Aaron goes to get more food, and Fate decides to play a prank on Mine, though Greed warns him not to. Later that night, Aaron returns home and looks sadly at the castle. Inside his house, Fate finds a painting of Aaron's family, and Greed realizes that Aaron's son looks a lot like Fate. Greed starts to understand why Aaron is the chief of this village. Mine wakes up angry when she sees her face has been drawn on. After that, Aaron has Fate practice blocking his attacks with just a stick. Fate thinks the stick will break. Aaron says he has trained him well enough to handle it. Fate manages to avoid getting cut and learns he needs to guess the angle of the opponent's sword to guide his stick. Aaron is impressed with Fate's progress and says he can now control his powerful stats. Mine wants to thank Fate, but instead decides to prank him by giving him a goatee. That night, Fate talks about their plan to leave the next day and thanks Aaron. Mine should thank him too, but she's too busy eating. Aaron tells them to enjoy the meal, but Mine says everything tastes the same to her now. Reed explains that losing taste is the cost of her wrath skill. Mine shares that she has a specific goal to achieve, and Aaron has his own mission. Aaron looks at the castle again and tells a surprising story. 15 years ago, the castle was his. One day, while he was away, the castle was attacked. His son tried to protect it, but the family and villagers were overpowered by a powerful beast fueled by anger. Since then, a scary lich lord has taken over the castle, and Aaron's family is trapped there. Aaron decides to go to the castle with Fate to face his past. Mine decides to stay behind to watch over the village and eat everything. She also demands 50 gold for her trouble. A little later, Fate defeats one of the castle guards. Aaron is amazed by Fate's magic arrow technique, which is so complicated that even experts in the capital have stopped studying it. Fate tries to be humble about his skills, but Greed insists on taking all the credit for how amazing they are. They get past several skeleton guards and hear music, so they decide to go inside. On the second floor, Aaron is shocked to see his son, Luke, playing the piano and his wife, Diana, sitting nearby. Aaron is surprised to see them alive. His family had been waiting for him to return with milk. Aaron thought they were dead, but they don't understand what he's talking about and just want to hear about his mission. Greed quietly tells Fate that they're definitely not alive. Aaron is about to give Luke a gift. Luke suddenly stabs him. Aaron was ready for the attack and comments on how strong Luke has become. Luke explains that he had to protect the castle while Aaron was away, and is angry that Eren only shows up now after leaving them for his work. Fate thinks about using his scythe to cut through the illusion, but Greed warns that doing so would destroy all the souls trapped here, sending them to an endless hell with no escape. Luke attacks again, but Fate can't bring himself to hurt them. Eren insists on dealing with it himself, so Fate runs off to find the Lich. Outside the room, Fate senses the Lich among the crowd and uses a magic arrow to make it reveal itself. The Lich is very powerful, with stats over 1,000,000. Fate uses the techniques he learned during training to fight the Lich and manages to break its weapon. Even so, the Lich can still control the corpses, who plead with Fate to save them. Fate hesitates to attack, feeling stuck. Luckily, Eren arrives just in time and cuts the corpse's tendons to stop them from moving. He sees his wife's corpse in the crowd and remembers when his family begged him not to go on a dangerous mission. Eren blames himself for not coming back sooner and decides he must end their suffering. He uses his Grand Cross skill to make a powerful light, but it's not enough. Reed tells Fate not to do this often and grabs a holy sword. Fate and Eren team up, combining their power for a stronger Grand Cross attack. The light fills the room and destroys the evil Lich. Afterward, Eren apologizes to his family. Their spirits appear and tell him it's not his fault, but Eren still feels regret. He promises to live in a way that honors their memory, and finally gives his son the long-awaited gift. Eren says goodbye to his family's spirits, and as the illusion starts to fade, the Lich tries to kill Eren one last time. Fate steps in, destroys the Lich, and uses his gluttony skill to absorb its powerful stats. Fate feels a quick pain, but is glad that Eren got to say his goodbyes. With the Lich defeated, Eren promises that he will join his family once he finishes his tasks. He also mentions that he has surpassed his level limit, thanks to fighting alongside Fate. They still have many monsters to deal with, so they decide to have a friendly competition. Eren gives Mine her payment for protecting the village. Mine says money is needed to rebuild and shares that money never lies. Lesson from her long life. Eren suddenly remembers seeing Mine before. 50 years ago, when monsters attacked this town. Fate is shocked by the long time span. Eren says Mullard. Mine looked exactly the same then. Mine praises Eren's memory and jokes that with 1,000 years of training he might catch up to her. She explains that she is a phantom who can't die. After Fate's eye returns to normal, he tells Eren that he has a condition that requires him to slay monsters frequently. Eren is surprisingly aware of this, and tells Fate to come back to the village after finishing his tasks, because he has something important to tell him. Meanwhile, Memel is impressed to see Raphael with the Philosopher's Stone. Memel was skeptical at first, but now thinks Raphael might achieve immortality. A servant enters and mentions Hu, revealing that he hasn't been seen since their return. Raphael is shocked to learn from the servant that his brother was killed during the hunt. The servant adds that the being known as Corpse wasn't a monster but a skilled fighter who was overcome by rage. Raphael becomes obsessed with finding out who Corpse really is. Back with Fate, gets annoyed seeing Mine eat all their food. Mine decides to share some with him. She uses Fate as a makeshift bed but complains he's not comfortable because he keeps moving. Fate protests, but Mine is already asleep. Curious about Mine's past, Fate wants to know more. Greed says he'll learn about it as they travel. Greed warns Fate not to dig too deep into Mine's past. Nearby, Roxy tells her group they are close to the Gallia border, and that they've reached the village Fate recently left. She mentions that a Lich Lord Crown Beast had taken over a nearby castle. Since they don't sense any monsters, it might have been freed. Eren arrives to greet them, and Mugen bows deeply. Amazed to meet the great Eren Barbatos, head of the Barbatos family and known as the Blade of Light. Eren seems indifferent and surprisingly knows Rox. He reveals that he knew her parents, and even named her. Eren shares that he's retired from being a hero, as he feels he failed those he cared about, and no longer has a reason to fight. Roxy is impressed that Eren defeated the Lich, but he admits, didn't do it alone. Maria wants to meet the powerful ally who helped Eren, and Roxy needs to include this person's name in her report to the capital. However, Fate asked Eren not to reveal his name, so Eren apologizes and says it's a secret. As they get ready to leave, Eren asks if the Valeri family suggested that Roxy join the expedition to Gallia. Roxy says it was her choice, but Eren thinks she might have been influenced. The Valeri and Barbatos families have always had a strained relationship, and Eren is surprised to hear that Roxy's father has passed away. Eren then offers to train Roxy in fighting while they're in Gallia, which she happily accepts. Training starts, and the rest of the group works on fixing the village. Eren notices Roxy's fighting skills are impressive, and clearly shows she was well trained by her father. Roxy is determined to get stronger to protect her people. Meanwhile, Fate and Mine explore some ancient ruins in Gallia. Mine reveals that she was born here but was taken to the imperial capital right after, but she doesn't remember it. Fate is shocked because Gallia was destroyed 4,000 years ago. As they look around, they find a strange structure that looks like a cocoon. Greed explains it's a chimera, a biological weapon from Gallia's past that was supposed to be deactivated. The chimera is a mix of monsters, but Greed says it was considered a failure. Mine reminds Fate that he owes her a favor, meaning she wants him to fight the chimera. Using his Identify skill, Fate sees that the chimera has incredibly high stats and finds errors in its skill reading. Greed explains that the mix of monsters makes it too chaotic to fully assess. Luckily, the chimera is still in its larval stage, so it should be manageable, although Fate is stunned to learn it isn't even fully grown yet. Mine explains that they can hurt its body but not kill it as long as its soul is intact. This is why she needs Fate to use his gluttony power to consume its soul, the most potent of the deadly sins. Mine wakes up the chimera, which is huge. Fate is confused to see a human inside it with the same red eyes as him. Mine says the human inside is meant to scare him. Greed warns Fate not to focus too much on Mine or he'll freeze up. The girl inside the chimera is the core. Mine needs Fate to finish her off. Fate hesitates, knowing that any soul he consumes will be tormented forever. Mine argues that the girl is just a monster in human form, and that they will both die if he doesn't act. The chimera proves this by launching a huge attack. Fate thinks about using his scythe, but Greed explains it won't work, because the magic attack damages indirectly through lava. Mine steps in to handle the lava wave, and they split up. Mine manages to cut off one of the chimera's arms, and Fate is relieved to see his magic arrows working. However, the giant chimera quickly regenerates its arm, showing off its relentless fighting power. Mine continues her attack, and Fate notices she seems to be hitting harder than before. Greed explains that the sloth power becomes heavier and more powerful with each swing, but greatly reduces her speed. The chimera, enraged at losing its arm again, starts changing form, and Mine warns Fate to stay back. Fate thinks about Roxy and realizes he can't always rely on others to protect him. He wants to be the one who truly helps Roxy and have real power. Determined to make a difference, Fate decides to push himself to the edge of starvation. Mine warns him that using his power too intensely could overwhelm him. Fate is willing to take the risk, knowing the consequences of failure could be disastrous. Using his power is incredibly painful. Fate controls it with determination. Mine holds off the chimera, and Fate announces he's ready to fight back. The chimera releases explosive feathers. Fate has a plan. Greed transforms into a bow and helps to detonate the feathers, covering the beast with the explosion. Fate channels 10% of his stats into a special arrow that creates a sandstorm, momentarily petrifying the giant chimera. Mine takes this chance to use her sloth power and delivers a powerful attack. Even with this strong attack, Greed urges them to finish off the monster before it can regenerate. The chimera activates a protective barrier, and Fate is stunned when his scythe can't break through it. Greed advises Fate to read the magic flow and aim for the barrier's weakest point. Fate manages to break through, but accidentally meets the chimera's gaze, causing it to quickly flee. Fate's eye starts to bleed, and time is running out. Mine tells him to get on her axe so she can launch him into the sky. As Fate soars, Greed reveals that Fate can now use his second-level secret technique. This technique costs 20% of his stats, but adds another blade to his scythe. Greed advises Fate to aim for the core of the chimera's magic power. Fate focuses hard, but soon finds himself trapped inside the chimera's barrier. Greed warns that the chimera is about to explode and will take Fate with it. In response, Fate quickly uses a powerful attack called Deadly Inferno. The attack hits the chimera's core. Something odd happens. Fate sees images of children and wonders if his telepathy skill is active. The kids start to disappear, leaving only two figures. One is the chimera, and the other is Mine. With Fate's gluttony skill activated, the battle ends, but instead of feeling triumphant, he is filled with heavy sadness. Greed explains that, even though the chimera was once human, consuming it is not pleasurable. Mine buries the girl and explains that she only remembers needing to kill chimeras to prevent more deaths. Fate worries about the dangerous nature of his gluttony skill, and asks Mine to promise that if he ever loses control, she will end his life. Mine agrees, giving him a comforting hug, and Fate thanks her. Later, Fate heads towards Babylon, while Mine goes off to build a village for some people. Mine has a premonition that Fate might not make it back before they meet again. As Greed levels up and transforms into a magic shield, Mine finds it amusing, and Fate begs her to help him hunt until he regains his stats. Mine wants to know how much he's willing to pay. Arriving at Babylon, the strong defensive wall between the kingdom and Gallia, Fate is impressed by its strength. Greed mentions he has been here before with his previous wielder, who also had a deadly sin skill but passed away. Greed reflects on the pain of saying goodbye due to his immortality. Fate asks about Greed's immortality, and Greed explains that weapons of mortal sin cannot be destroyed. As they walk through Babylon, a man announces the arrival of the new lord from the royal capital. Fate nervously puts on his mask, and Greed reminds him to stay calm. People celebrate Roxy's arrival, and Greed nudges Fate to wave along with everyone. Suddenly, Fate hears someone say that Roxy is going to die, and a mysterious girl confirms it, saying that Roxy's death is imminent.